You were never supposed to be part of my future. The Alpha King's voice carried across the royal hall, cold enough to silence every whisper around him. Emily Carter stood beneath the crystal chandeliers, her pale face calm even as those words settled over the room. She was a white Omega woman, 27 years old, dressed in a simple cream gown that looked almost fragile beneath the grandeur of the palace. Beside her stood her young son, Noah, still too small to understand why every noble in the room had suddenly gone quiet. Across the polished marble floor stood Adrian Blackwood, the 34-year-old White King Alpha whose presence could command an entire kingdom without a raised voice. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his black royal suit immaculate, and his grey eyes fixed on Emily with a distance that had not always been there. For years earlier, those same eyes had softened whenever he looked at her. Tonight, they seemed to belong to the crown instead of the man she had once trusted. Victoria Hale stood among the senior members of the Royal Council, her expression carefully composed. She had spent months asking questions that sounded innocent but had slowly turned the court against Emily. Was an Omega truly prepared to raise the heir? Did Emily understand the responsibilities of a royal family? Should the future of the kingdom depend on someone without a powerful family name? Adrian had listened to every question. Tonight, he had finally allowed those doubts to speak for him. Emily looked directly at him. Do you really believe what they are saying? Adrian's jaw tightened. This is not about what I believe. Then what is it about? The kingdom needs certainty. Emily glanced toward Noah, then back at Adrian. And I am the uncertainty. Adrian said nothing. That silence hurt more than an answer. Emily had spent 4 years believing that the man behind the crown knew who she was. She had stayed beside him through endless council meetings, sleepless nights, and the pressure of a royal family that never completely accepted her. She had believed that when Adrian looked at her, he saw the woman who knew his quiet habits, the woman who could tell when he needed a moment alone, the woman who had given him a family he once seemed afraid to lose. But tonight, the king looked at her as though she were a problem that needed to be removed. Then came the sentence that would change all three of their lives. You were a mistake. The room went completely silent. Noah looked up at his mother. Emily felt the ache in her chest, but she refused to let the court see her break. She gently took Noah's hand. Then she looked at Adrian one final time. Then you will never have to see your mistake again. Adrian's expression changed. Emily. She turned toward the great oak doors. No one stopped her. She walked away with Noah beside her, leaving behind the throne, the jewels, the royal gifts, and the life she had once hoped would be permanent. Before sunrise, Emily would disappear from the kingdom with the heir. Adrian would wake to an empty room and believe he had protected his crown. He would not yet understand that the words he had spoken in anger would become the reason he spent the next 4 years searching for the family he had chosen to lose. Before the crown became the reason Emily left, there had been a time when Adrian looked at her as though she were the only person in the palace who could see the man beneath the title. Emily had entered the royal household quietly, without a powerful family name or political allies, and she never expected the palace to belong to her. She only wanted a place where she and Adrian could build something real. At first, Adrian was difficult to understand. He was disciplined, reserved, and rarely allowed anyone to see when the weight of the kingdom became too heavy. Emily noticed anyway. She knew when he had spent too many hours in the council chamber. She knew that he preferred black coffee in the morning and that he often walked through the winter garden when he needed to think. She never demanded explanations. She simply stayed close enough for him to know he did not have to face every difficult moment alone. Slowly, the king began seeking her company. He would find her in the library and ask what she was reading. He would sit beside her during quiet evenings and listen while she talked about ordinary things that had nothing to do with royal affairs. For Emily, those moments mattered more than any jewel the palace could offer. Then Noah was born, and Adrian seemed to discover a part of himself he had never known existed. The first time he held his son, the Alpha King who could command an entire kingdom looked completely uncertain. Emily watched his expression soften as he looked down at the tiny child. "He knows your voice," she whispered. Adrian glanced at her. "How do you know?" Emily smiled. "Because he becomes quiet whenever you speak." Adrian smiled too, and for a brief moment, there was no council, no crown, and no pressure from the royal families. There was only a father, a mother, and their child. But the palace had never been comfortable with that simplicity. The council wanted Adrian to choose a queen from a powerful family, someone whose relatives could strengthen political alliances. Victoria Hale quickly became their preferred choice. She was polished, educated in royal customs, and connected to several influential families. Victoria never openly attacked Emily. She was far too careful for that. Instead, she asked questions. "Does Emily understand the northern alliances?" she would say during council meetings. "Is an Omega without a powerful family truly prepared to guide the heir?" Each question sounded reasonable on its own, but together they created doubt. Adrian heard them all. At first, he defended Emily. Then he became quieter. Eventually, he started bringing council concerns home. One evening, Emily found him standing beside Noah's room, watching their son sleep. "They want you to choose someone else," she said softly. Adrian did not deny it. "They believe the kingdom needs stability." Emily looked at him. "And what do you believe?" Adrian reached for her hand. "I believe you and Noah are my family." She wanted to believe him. She truly did. But outside that room, Victoria and the council were already discussing something Adrian had not yet understood. Noah was not merely the king's son. He was the future heir, and certain people had begun to realize that whoever controlled the heir could influence the future of the kingdom. Emily would soon discover that the questions surrounding her were never really about whether she belonged beside Adrian. They were about whether she could be removed from his side without him realizing who had benefited from her absence. Victoria Hale never needed to raise her voice to make people question Emily. She understood that in the royal court, a quiet question could travel farther than an accusation. Over the following months, she became a constant presence beside Adrian, offering advice during council meetings and presenting herself as someone who understood the demands of the crown. Emily noticed the pattern, but she refused to compete with another woman for Adrian's attention. She trusted that their family was stronger than palace gossip. Then the questions became more serious. One afternoon, Emily was walking through the eastern corridor with Noah when two council advisors stopped talking as soon as they saw them. Noah looked up at his mother. "Why did they stop?" Emily gave him a gentle smile. "Sometimes people talk about things they do not understand." She continued toward the nursery, but the uneasy feeling stayed with her. That evening, Adrian returned from a long council meeting carrying a dark leather folder. He found Emily in the library, sitting beside the fireplace while Noah played quietly on the rug. "We need to discuss something," Adrian said. Emily closed her book. "What happened?" Adrian placed the folder on the table. "Several reports suggest that you have been receiving private correspondence from families in the Northern Territories." Emily looked at him in disbelief. "That is not true." Adrian opened the folder and showed her several letters. Emily recognized the names of the people mentioned, but the wording was unfamiliar. "These are not the letters I received." Adrian studied her expression. "Are you certain?" "I am certain." Emily pushed the papers back toward him. "You know me better than this." Adrian looked away for a moment. That small hesitation hurt. Emily had spent years learning the difference between Adrian's silence and his doubt. This was doubt. "The council is concerned about your influence over Noah," he said. Emily's expression became serious. "Your council is concerned about a 4-year-old child. They believe the heir should be raised according to royal tradition." Emily stood. "He is our son before he is your heir." Adrian did not answer immediately. Before he could respond, the library doors opened and Victoria entered with two senior advisors. She carried another document. "Your Majesty, there is one more matter." Emily turned toward her. Victoria placed the report on the table. "The royal physician has identified an unusual hereditary marker in Noah's bloodline." Emily's heart tightened. Adrian looked at the report. "What does that mean?" Victoria remained calm. "It means the heir may carry a rare connection to the oldest branch of the royal family." Emily stepped closer. "Is he in danger?" "No," Victoria replied. "But his heritage makes him politically significant." Emily looked at Adrian. "He is a child." Victoria smiled politely. "Of course. But the future of the kingdom cannot be ignored." Emily understood the danger immediately. They were no longer discussing whether she belonged beside Adrian. They were discussing who would control Noah's future. Later that night, Emily visited the royal physician, Samuel Brooks, and asked to see the original medical records. Samuel looked troubled when he compared them with the report Victoria had presented. "These documents are incomplete," he said quietly. Emily stared at him. "Who changed them?" Samuel did not know. But when Emily returned to her rooms, she found an anonymous note waiting beneath her book. It contained only one sentence: "Do not tell the king what you have discovered." Emily read it twice. Then she looked toward Noah's room. For the first time, she realized that someone inside the palace was watching her. And worse, someone already knew she was beginning to uncover the truth. Emily had spent the entire night staring at the anonymous note, but by morning, her fear had become something stronger. It had become certainty. Someone inside the palace wanted her silent, and that meant she could no longer assume Adrian would protect her simply because he loved her. She needed answers before anyone could make another decision about Noah. After breakfast, Emily returned to Samuel Brooks with the original medical records. The older physician closed his office door and carefully placed the papers across his desk. "The report Victoria showed the council was based on information from this file," he said, pointing to several pages, but important details were removed. Emily leaned closer. "What details?" Samuel showed her a handwritten note attached to the original examination. "Noah's hereditary marker is rare, but it does not place him in immediate danger. More importantly, it confirms that his bloodline is directly connected to the oldest royal family." Emily felt a chill despite the warmth of the room. "Who else knows?" Samuel looked uncomfortable. "I cannot say. But someone requested copies of these records several weeks ago." Emily understood what that meant. Someone had been preparing for this long before the council confronted her. That evening, she went to Adrian's private study. He was standing beside the window when she entered, watching snow fall over the palace gardens. "I need you to listen to me," she said. Adrian turned. "I am listening." Emily placed the original medical records on his desk. "These are Noah's complete records." The report shown to the council was altered. Adrian picked up the pages and read them carefully. His expression changed. "Why did you not tell me?" Emily looked directly at him. "Because I found a note telling me not to tell you." Adrian's eyes narrowed. "Who wrote it?" "I do not know." He set the papers down. "Emily, you should have come to me." She gave a quiet, almost sad smile. "I tried. You brought me reports written by people who already suspected me." Adrian had no immediate answer. Before either could continue, the study doors opened. Victoria entered with several council members. "Your Majesty, we need your decision regarding the heir." Emily turned toward them. Victoria remained composed. "The council believes Noah should be placed under formal royal supervision until his future can be secured." Emily's expression hardened. "He is 4 years old. He needs his parents, not a committee." Victoria replied calmly. This is about protecting the kingdom. Emily looked at Adrian. This was the moment she had feared. She wanted him to say that Noah was their son before he was an heir. She wanted him to trust her before the council. Adrian looked at the documents, then at Victoria, then at Emily. His hesitation lasted only a few seconds, but to Emily it felt like an answer. Perhaps, Adrian said quietly, some distance would allow everyone to reconsider what is best for Noah. Emily stared at him. Distance? Until the matter is resolved. She slowly nodded. Something inside her became completely still. She no longer needed to argue. She no longer needed to prove that she belonged beside him. If Adrian could not protect their family while she remained inside the palace, she would protect Noah herself. That night, Emily opened a small wooden chest and began packing. She took Noah's winter clothes, a few books, her mother's old bracelet, and the money she had saved. She left the royal jewelry untouched. She left the gowns Adrian had once given her. She left everything that represented a life she no longer trusted. Before closing the chest, she looked toward Noah sleeping peacefully in his room. You will grow up knowing you are loved, she whispered. Before sunrise, Emily would leave the palace with her son. She did not know where they would go. She only knew they could not stay. Before sunrise, Emily quietly lifted Noah from his bed and wrapped him in a warm winter coat. The palace corridors were almost completely silent, with only the faint sound of the heating system beneath the marble floors. Noah was still sleepy as he held his mother's hand. Where are we going? He asked softly. Emily looked down at him and smiled. Somewhere peaceful. She did not tell him that she had no clear destination. She only knew that staying would mean allowing other people to decide what happened to him. Emily carried a small travel bag containing Noah's clothes, a few books, her mother's bracelet, and the money she had saved over the years. She had left every royal jewel behind. She did not want the crown's wealth to become another chain connecting her to a place where she no longer felt safe. They reached a private service entrance used by palace staff and stepped into the cold morning air. Emily paused for one final moment and looked back at the palace. She remembered the woman she had been when she first arrived there. She had believed love could survive every difficult conversation. She had believed Adrian would always recognize the person standing beside him. Most of all, she had believed their family mattered more than the opinions of the council. Now she turned away. Several hours later, Adrian entered the breakfast hall and immediately noticed the empty chair beside his own. Noah's usual place remained untouched. Where are Emily and Noah? He asked. A servant lowered his eyes. Your Majesty, Lady Emily left before sunrise. Adrian's expression changed. Where did she go? We do not know. He walked directly to her rooms. The wardrobe was nearly empty, but the expensive gowns and royal jewelry remained. On the desk, he found a small family photograph. Adrian picked it up and turned it over. 3 words were written on the back in Emily's handwriting. We were a family. He stared at the message for several seconds. Then he found the letter beside it. Adrian, I am not leaving because I stopped caring about you. I am leaving because I cannot allow Noah to grow up believing that his worth depends on the crown. You asked for distance. I am giving you exactly that. Please do not search for us unless you are ready to understand why we had to leave. Adrian read the letter twice. His first instinct was to issue orders and send royal officials across the kingdom. Then he remembered Emily's final sentence. Do not search for us unless you are ready to understand. He lowered the letter. For the first time, he wondered whether searching for them immediately would simply prove that he still believed his authority gave him the right to decide their lives. He returned to the council chamber instead. Victoria was already waiting. Your Majesty, I understand that Emily has left. Adrian looked at her carefully. How did you know? Victoria paused. The palace staff informed me. Adrian's expression remained calm. I did not tell the staff where she went. Victoria said nothing. That silence stayed with him. Later that evening, Adrian returned to Emily's empty room and opened the original medical file again. He noticed something he had missed before. The altered report had been prepared before Emily had ever been accused. Someone had already decided that she needed to be removed. Adrian sat alone beneath the dim light, reading the pages again and again. For years ago, he had believed Emily was the problem. Tonight, for the first time, he wondered whether she had been the person who was right all along. And far beyond the palace, Emily and Noah were already traveling toward a life where nobody knew their names, their titles, or the secret waiting inside their family. For years passed before Adrian finally understood that losing Emily had never been the worst part of his mistake. The worst part was realizing how many ordinary moments he had missed because he had trusted the wrong people. During those 4 years, Emily built a quiet life nearly 300 miles from the capital, in a small mountain town where nobody cared about royal titles. She rented a modest wooden cabin surrounded by pine trees and snow-covered hills, found work at a local bookstore, and learned to live without servants, council meetings, or palace expectations. Noah grew up believing that his mother had chosen their home because she loved the mountains. He knew nothing about the crown waiting for him beyond those hills. He was 4 years old now, curious, cheerful, and completely unaware that his father had spent years searching for him. Emily never spoke bitterly about Adrian. When Noah asked about his father, she always answered carefully. Your father made mistakes, she would say. People can make mistakes and still have a chance to become better. She never told Noah that Adrian had called her a mistake. That pain belonged to her, not to a child. Back in the capital, Adrian had changed. He no longer accepted council reports without verification. He requested original records, questioned old decisions, and quietly reviewed every document connected to Emily's departure. The deeper he looked, the more disturbing the pattern became. Several letters had been altered. Important medical information had been withheld. Council discussions about Noah had begun months before Adrian ever confronted Emily. Yet there was still no clear evidence of where Emily had gone. Then, one winter morning, a regional official sent Adrian a report from a small mountain district. A woman matching Emily's description had lived there for several years. She had a young son. Adrian read the report once, then again. The child's age stopped him completely. 4 years old. He immediately ordered no royal procession and no public announcement. He traveled north with only one trusted driver, determined not to turn his search into another command from the crown. The journey took nearly 2 days. Snow covered the mountain roads, and the farther Adrian traveled from the capital, the quieter everything became. When he reached the town, he showed the official photograph he carried. An elderly innkeeper studied it for a long moment before recognizing Emily. She came here years ago, the woman said. She wanted a quiet place where she could raise her son. Adrian's voice was barely above a whisper. Do you know where she is now? The innkeeper pointed toward a narrow mountain road. There is a cabin about 20 miles from here. Adrian thanked her and continued alone. Near sunset, he finally saw it. A small wooden cabin stood between tall pine trees, its windows glowing warmly against the cold blue evening. Through the glass, Adrian saw Emily sitting beside a little boy at a wooden table. Noah was working on a wooden puzzle, laughing softly as Emily helped him. Adrian stopped several yards away. He had imagined this moment for 4 years, but nothing had prepared him for the reality of seeing his son alive, happy, and completely unaware of who stood outside. The boy looked up toward the window. For one brief second, Adrian saw his own gray eyes reflected in Noah's face. His breath caught. The king who had once believed he could decide the future of everyone around him suddenly felt powerless. He could have knocked. He could have ordered the door opened. But he remembered Emily's letter. Do not search for us unless you are ready to understand why we had to leave. So Adrian remained in the snow, waiting. For the first time in his life, the Alpha King understood that finding his family did not give him the right to enter their lives. He would have to earn that right, one choice at a time. Adrian waited until morning before approaching the cabin, giving himself one night to decide whether he was there because he missed his family or because he finally understood what he had done. When the first pale light appeared between the mountains, he walked toward the door without a crown, without an escort, and without the authority that had once made everyone around him obey. He knocked softly. Inside, Emily looked up from the kitchen table. The moment she saw him through the window, her expression became completely still. Noah noticed her reaction and turned toward the door. "Who is it?" Emily took a slow breath. "Someone I used to know." She walked to the entrance and opened the door only partway. Cold morning air entered the warm cabin. Adrian stood several feet away, his dark coat covered with a thin layer of snow. "Emily." She looked at him for several seconds. "You found us?" "Yes." "Why?" Adrian did not answer immediately. "Because I needed to know that you were safe." Emily's eyes remained guarded. "And now that you know? Now I need to know whether you want me here." That answer surprised her. For years earlier, Adrian would have assumed the palace belonged wherever he stood. Now he waited outside her door for permission. Noah stepped closer to Emily and looked at the stranger. His curious gray eyes moved from Adrian to his mother. "Who is he?" Emily looked down at her son. "His name is Adrian." Noah studied the man outside. "Is he from the palace?" Adrian nodded. "Yes." Noah's eyes widened slightly. "Are you the king?" Adrian lowered himself carefully so they were closer to the same height. "I am." Noah looked at Emily again. Then he asked the question Adrian had feared most. "Are you the king who made my mother sad?" The mountain seemed completely silent. Emily did not answer for him. Adrian looked at the child and understood that this was the first honest judgment he had faced in years. He could have explained the council. He could have blamed Victoria. He could have described the pressure of the crown. Instead, he simply said, "Yes." Noah waited. Adrian continued, "I made a mistake, and your mother deserved better from me." Noah seemed to consider that answer. "Did you say sorry?" Adrian looked toward Emily. "Not the way I should have." Noah nodded slowly, then returned to his puzzle at the table. Emily stepped outside and closed the door behind her. "You should not have come here expecting forgiveness." "I did not." "You cannot undo 4 years." Adrian looked toward the cabin. "I know. Noah does not know you." "I know that too." Emily folded her arms. "Then what do you want?" Adrian took a slow breath. "A chance to earn a place in his life. And if you allow it, a chance to prove that I am not the man who stood in that palace 4 years ago." Emily studied him. "You are still the king." Adrian looked down at the simple ring on his hand. "Yes. But I finally understand that being king does not give me ownership over you or Noah." Emily's expression softened for only a moment. Adrian reached into his coat and removed the royal signet. He placed it on the fence between them. "This belongs to the kingdom," he said. "It does not belong between us." Emily looked at the signet, then at him. She remembered the night he had called her a mistake. She remembered leaving before sunrise. She remembered every quiet evening when Noah had asked questions she could not fully answer. She wanted to forgive him, but forgiveness could not be given simply because he had finally arrived. Adrian seemed to understand. "I will leave today," he said. "I will not ask you to return. If you want me to come back, you can tell me. If you do not, I will respect that." He turned toward the snowy road. Emily watched him take several steps away. For the first time, the man who once believed his crown gave him every answer was walking away without demanding one. Behind him, the cabin door remained open. Emily looked at Noah, then at the road disappearing between the mountains. She did not call Adrian back. Not yet. But for the first time in 4 years, she did not close the door either. Adrian returned to the capital alone, and for the first time in years, the palace seemed smaller than he remembered. The halls were still grand, the marble floors still polished, and the crystal chandeliers still filled the ceilings with golden light, but none of it felt like victory anymore. He had found Emily and Noah, yet he had returned without them. That was the consequence he finally understood. In the council chamber, Victoria Hale was waiting with several senior advisors. "Your Majesty, we heard you located the Omega and the Heir." Adrian walked to the long table and placed his royal signet upon it. "I found them." Victoria's expression remained carefully neutral. "Then the heir should be brought back immediately." Adrian looked at her. No, the single word changed the atmosphere in the room. One advisor shifted uneasily. Victoria remained composed. "Your Majesty, Noah is the future of this kingdom." "He is also a 4-year-old child," Adrian replied. "And he has spent his entire life without knowing the palace." Victoria folded her hands. "Emily has kept him away from his rightful position." Adrian's eyes hardened. "Emily protected him from people who wanted to turn him into a political symbol." Silence followed. Victoria looked toward the documents on the table. "Are you suggesting the council acted improperly?" Adrian opened the original medical file he had brought from the archives. "I am asking why the report presented to me 4 years ago was incomplete." No one answered. He placed another document beside it. Then another. The original letters. The altered copies. The medical records. The council correspondence that showed discussions about removing Emily before Adrian had ever confronted her. One by one, the pieces formed a picture he could no longer ignore. Victoria finally spoke. "Everything we did was meant to protect the crown." Adrian looked at her quietly. "You protected the crown so well that I forgot I was supposed to protect my family." Victoria's expression faltered. Adrian did not shout. He did not humiliate her before the council. He simply ordered an independent review of every decision involving Emily and Noah. Until that review was complete, Victoria would have no authority over matters concerning the heir. Then Adrian did something that surprised everyone in the chamber. He refused to issue an order bringing Emily back. "If she returns," he said, "it will be because she chooses to return." That evening, Adrian wrote a letter to Emily. He did not mention the throne. He did not mention Noah's inheritance. He did not ask when she would come home. He simply told her what he had done. He told her the council's records were being reviewed, that the altered documents had been discovered, and that no one would force her or Noah back to the palace. At the end, he wrote one sentence. "You do not owe me another chance." Emily received the letter several days later at the cabin. She read it beside the fireplace while Noah played with his wooden puzzle. She expected anger to rise inside her, but instead she felt something unfamiliar. Relief. Not because Adrian had finally admitted he was wrong, but because he had stopped trying to control the outcome. She folded the letter carefully and placed it beside her mother's bracelet. That night, she looked out at the mountains and remembered the man Adrian had been before the crown changed him. She also remembered the man standing outside her cabin, leaving without demanding forgiveness. Noah looked up from his puzzle. "Is the king coming back?" Emily looked at her son. "I do not know." Noah smiled. "Maybe he can help me finish this one." Emily looked down at the puzzle and felt a quiet warmth in her chest. For the first time, the possibility of Adrian returning did not feel like a threat. It felt like a choice. And that difference changed everything. Emily did not make her decision overnight. For several weeks, she watched Adrian from a distance through his letters and the small changes taking place in the kingdom. He never demanded an answer. He never sent royal officials to her cabin. He simply kept his word. One spring morning, Emily received another letter. This one was shorter than the others. The council review was complete. The altered documents had been confirmed. Several officials had been removed from decisions concerning Noah, and new rules had been created to ensure that the heir's parents would always have a voice in his future. At the bottom of the letter, Adrian had written only one sentence: "If you ever decide to return, I will meet you as your equal, not as your king." Emily read those words twice. Then she folded the letter and looked toward Noah. "Would you like to see the palace?" she asked. Noah's eyes widened. "The palace where you used to live?" Emily nodded. "Only if you want to." Noah thought for a moment. "Can we come back here afterward?" Emily smiled. "Yes. This will always be home too." 3 days later, Emily and Noah traveled south. When they finally reached the capital, the palace appeared exactly as Emily remembered it, with its towering windows, polished stone walls, and wide marble steps. Yet she felt different walking toward it. For years earlier, she had left through a quiet service entrance carrying a small bag and a sleeping child. Now she returned through the main doors with her son holding her hand, and she did not feel like someone asking permission to belong. Adrian waited at the far end of the grand hall. He wore a formal black suit, but he was not wearing the royal signet. He had deliberately left it behind. When he saw Emily, he did not move toward her until she gave a small nod. Then he walked forward. His eyes moved to Noah. "Hello," he said gently. Noah looked at him with familiar curiosity. "You are the king." Adrian smiled. "I am." Noah held up his wooden puzzle. "I brought this." Adrian looked at it. "I remember that puzzle." Noah blinked. "How?" Adrian glanced at Emily. "Because your mother told me about it." It was not entirely true, but it was close enough to make Noah smile. Emily watched the exchange quietly. She had imagined this moment many times, but never like this. There was no dramatic declaration, no demand for forgiveness, and no attempt to erase the past. There was simply a father meeting his son again. Adrian looked at Emily. "I know this does not fix everything." Emily nodded. "It does not. I know trust will take time." "It will." Adrian took a slow breath. "Then I will give you time." Emily looked around the hall. The same place where he had once called her a mistake now felt strangely different. Not because the palace had changed, but because she had. She was no longer waiting for Adrian to decide her worth. She had already decided it for herself. Noah reached for both their hands. Emily looked at Adrian. After a long silence, she allowed him to take Noah's other hand. It was a small gesture, but Adrian understood its meaning. They would not pretend the past had never happened. They would build something new from what remained. And when the palace doors closed behind them, Emily knew she had not returned because the king had summoned his Omega. She had returned because, for the first time, she was free to choose. Adrian had once believed the crown gave him the right to decide who belonged beside him. Now he understood the truth: love was never something a king could command, and family was never something a crown could own. Emily had never needed his throne to prove her worth. He had needed to lose her before he learned how to respect it.